Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing a legendary weapon ranking for Guild Wars 2. I just got back into the game relatively recently and I've been enjoying my time, so I thought we'd go through and do a ranking on the different legendary weapons. It's only going to be the first two gens of the legendary weapons because I feel like the Gen 3 having basically all the same animations is basically just, if you like the animations, make them. If you don't, do not. They're not really anything super unique or anything like that. They're very cool, and they do have very cool effects, but they all are basically the same weapon, just if you like the effect, make it. Whereas these have their own unique models and some other stuff to them, so we're going to go over them individually, the Gen 1 and Gen 2. As always, this is just my personal opinion, so let's get right into it. We are going to do the same weapons as each other at the same time, as that makes it easier to talk and compare both weapons. So first up is Astrolaria. Astrolaria is a very cool looking axe in my opinion. I love the theming. I love the whole sky theme. I love the way it looks. The only problem with me personally is the actual color of the axe itself. It's kind of like this weird cheese yellow in my opinion. I don't know. It does off-put me a little bit, but it's not a bad weapon. It's a very good weapon. Like I said, I love the effects and everything. Solid A. The only thing that even holds this axe down a little bit is the fact that it's kind of annoying to get. But I definitely think if you want a weapon, it's worth going for. On the other hand, Frostfang is also an A in my opinion, just slightly worse. But it's much easier to get. It does match a little bit better with some of the, or I guess contrast better with a lot of the other current legendaries a little bit better. In my opinion, I do like it. I do have this one for full disclosure over Astrolaria, due to ease of access and stuff like that, and also just it looking better with some of the other weapons I have. But I think they're very comparable. I do think Astrolaria is a little bit better, but it does cost twice as much and is 4 times as much of a pain in the ass to get. So I think the Frostfang is a perfectly fine, solid weapon. Now let's go on to swords. First up is the OG Bolt. This is a solid C. The only thing that is good about this sword is its animations. The actual model on this sword is garbage. Well, not garbage, but it looks like a rusty fence gate. I've never been a huge fan of it. I didn't make it for years, waiting for the Gen 2 Legendary just because I didn't like it, so I have a personal bias against it. It's not bad. The effects are really cool, so if you do have it, like, it's definitely a cool weapon. But it also gets brought down a little bit because the Shining Blade is an S tier. The Shining Blade is one of the best legendaries, if not arguably the best. We'll probably have one or maybe one more higher than it later on, in my opinion, but I think overall this is probably one of the best. It's got the best animations. It's very clean, but it's still got a lot going on, despite being a relatively basic-ish skin. Good coloring as well. Just a very nice skin overall, and also not that much of a pain in the ass to get. All right, next up are the two weapons that are the farthest apart by far. At least in my opinion, the two weapons that are the farthest apart compared to the, well, maybe the next ones after, actually both of these two weapons, but let's talk about short bows next. So what do I personally like in a short bow? I like larger short bows. I don't like short bows that are too small, and I appreciate anything that looks cool. So for that reason, Gw2 Chompwok gets a solid S below the Shining Blade, though. The tiger effects are cool. The coloration is great. Red, gold, black. It's a large bow, which is nice. It's got good footprints. It's got good effects. It's beautiful. I love it. On the other hand, the Dreamer is absolutely awful. Coloring's bad. Animations are stupid. Weapons silly. Sounds awful. This is basically this is my personal least favorite legendary, even if I do probably end up ranking one legendary lower. It's just, I hate the thing, and part of it is due to personal like experience with the weapon. A lot of the bad actors I have met have this weapon. I have never met a player that I'm like, damn, that's a good player that has this weapon. And I've met plenty of players that I'm like, damn, do you have your hands on your keyboard that have this weapon? So, or just assholes. So, I don't know. Personally, I don't like this one. Next up is a dagger. This is the Claws of the Con-ur. This is actually the worst legendary. This is the most phoned in legendary. This is the one legendary that if I see someone with it, I actually question it. Like, I kind of get the Dreamer. Some people like the stupid weapons. That's fine. This is actually just a worse skin than the Hall of Monument skin you get for playing Guild Wars 1. The effects are okay, but it really doesn't do it for me. That's really meh. Um, and personally, I think it's the worst dagger, or the worst legendary. Incinerator, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It is one of the best. The fire is a great aesthetic. The larger blade size than a plain dagger is nice. The fact that it's got a really cool sheath and pull out animation is nice. It's got very satisfying auto attack sounds, which is great. It's got good effects. The Incinerator is basically the polar opposite of the Claw, where the Claw doesn't have a unique model and the effects are okay at best. The Incinerator has a unique model that is super unique and is super cool. Alright, moving on to great swords. Let's just grab all the great swords and put them up here. So I'm going to be ranking Twilight, Eternity, Sunrise all at the same time. Personally, these are the ideal legendaries in my opinion. This is what I want from a legendary weapon. I'm well aware that this is not everybody's favorite, and I get why other people do not like them. But this is what I want in a legendary. It's got a good effect that is cool. The weapon is about showing off the effect. The weapon itself is not too overly detailed. It's actually arguably kind of plain, but it really does let the legendary effect shine. I think Eternity is an S. That silly little gem on top of the sword does unironically make it better, and the fact that it's swapped back and forth is awesome. I then think Twilight is probably bottom of S. Twilight is the black color is very good, and then for me personally, Sunrise would be probably right behind Australaria. I think Sunrise is the weakest of the three by itself, but you need it to make Eternity, so, you know. But I think Eternity is really cool. I understand that not a lot of people share that opinion, but I personally think it's exactly what I want in a weapon. It's flashy, but it's not annoying flashy like the Dreamer is. Next up is this is called the Exordium. How do you pronounce this? Exordium, yeah. This is a solid B tier weapon for me. Coloration, kind of bad. It's like orangey and blue, not really good for me as a player personally. I'm mainly like a black and white, so I want purples, blues, golds. This is like blue and orange. If this is like blue and gold, I'm in. But blue and orange, not so much. Also, I know the big selling point of this thing is that it transforms, but the fact that it transforms into a bunch of different weapons kind of makes the fact that it has a really cool and unique like base model a little bit lame because you just don't see it that much. Also, some of the transforms are unironically downgrades to the base form. Stuff like the axe transform, super cool. Stuff like the when you get spikes on the side of it, the scythe, not as cool really. When you get like the big ass like shield looking thing when you block, kind of cool. Reminds me kind of like a Charblade. When it's like this weird double-edged spear, again, not as cool. This is one of those weapons that I think is definitely cool, but it has the problem, at least for me, that it's competing against my favorite weapon, which has much better coloration, much better. Black and red and like golds are just so much better than whatever this thing is trying to do. The transforming thing is super cool, and I do understand why people would like this weapon and why people would have it, but just not for me, personally. And I definitely was disappointed whenever it came out. Now, next up is maces. Let's start off with Eureka. This is a weird weapon. I'm going to put this at the bottom of A for now. I think this weapon has pretty good effects. It's got like this blacky, red, smoky trail. And the footfalls are kind of unique in that they're 3D. They actually pop out of the ground instead of just being like a blotch of color on the ground. This weapon gets carried a little bit by the fact that it's a mace, and maces in general are pretty bad. If this was a sword skin with this theme, it'd probably be a lot lower if it was like the same thing meta into a sword. But there isn't as much. Maces and hammers in particular are kind of rough weapons to actually do stuff with. So, I don't know. I feel like they did all right with this one. This one kind of got poo-pooed on release, but I feel like it's okay. It doesn't also help that its competition is the Moot, which we'll go to next. This is a bottom of C tier legendary at best. Like, the footfalls are okay, but the weapon itself looks stupid. A lot of the particles on it aren't that great. I don't know. It's just not very good. The particles are good, the footfalls are cool, but the actual weapon itself doesn't really match anything. It looks kind of lame, personally. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it myself, so it'll chill down there with a bolt in C tier. Next up is the Flames of War. Yeah, Flames of War. Or it's just Flames of War, not the. This is the Balthazar themed torch skin. Now, this thing is actually pretty cool, in my opinion, but it does have a couple negatives. My main two negatives with this thing is that, so a lot of the effects, like the arm effect, the footfall stuff, is like this dark red fire, but for some reason the draw effect is a bright fire. Not a deal breaker, but it's like, it's a little weird that it's mismatched like that. You would figure everything would be that deep red fire that the weapon has. Now, where would I put it? Probably top of B, maybe. It's not a bad skin, but it definitely also has a problem that I do not like in weapons, where I personally do not like it when my offhand is bigger than my main hand. It just feels weird and wrong. Because this one is so big, not only like lengthwise, but girthy as well, it kind of doesn't do it for me. I probably would end up making this one if I was to make a Torch Legendary. Not exactly sure, though. But overall, I think it's an okay weapon. I think all the B weapons are stuff that is still very, very solid. The C weapons are good if you like the effects generally, and the Ds are the ones I would be like, no, just send me the gold if you're going to make them. Rodgort is also a B tier weapon. It's a little bit plain, especially because it carries over a lot of the effects from the incinerator. It has like a similar arm effect. It has a similar draw effect. Similar footfalls. It's not bad. The fact that the torch kind of ignites whenever you take it out and breathes fire, it's not bad. It's just not anything super exciting. But again, a lot of these weapons, I'm not necessarily always comparing them to each other. I'm comparing them to the other things in their weapon class and the other weapons they're directly competing with. So like, if you don't have that torch that's just like your hand is on fire, like this is a pretty good torch. Personally, I don't know. Take with this what you will. Be angry if you must. We're gonna do the underwater weapons now, but we're just gonna fire through them pretty quick and go over why. B tier on the spear gun. In general, none of these are really worth making, but B tier on the spear gun for looks. It looks all right. The weapon effects are okay, but it's got the problem of it's an underwater weapon, and the underwater weapons probably get knocked down a tier just because they're underwater weapons. The spear, on the other hand, is insanely good. The spear looks beautiful. I love this spear. It's Kamoke Kai. Something like that. Very hard to pronounce for me. But it's got this kind of cool purple effect around it. It's like a shark with a whole bunch of spears coming out of its mouth. It summons a ghostly shark with some of its animations. I will be making this if we ever actually go to an underwater, like have a reason to have underwater content. I definitely would be making this. Next up is Kraken. Kraken is a solid, maybe like middle of C. It's okay. The only thing this weapon has going for it is the fact that like the snake heads move on it. The actual effects and stuff on this weapon aren't even that good. And it doesn't really do anything super unique to your like skill effects. Actually, it doesn't do anything to your skill effects. So yeah, this might get knocked down one. This is a phone. This doesn't even have modified skill effects. This isn't even a legendary. What the hell? Yeah, what on earth are you doing, game? Why doesn't this have any skill effects? Anyway, let's move on to pistols now. So now you're gonna see something that might seem weird considering the Moot and the Dream replacement. Equip is going right here. Now I'll tell you why. Equip is a silly weapon. I don't like silly weapons in general, but it's small. Its outline looks good, and it has, in my opinion, my favorite legendary effect of any legendary. The purple aura around your character is just the best legendary effect, in my opinion. The other ones have like some cool effects, but it's the best aura effect at the very least. I absolutely love it. I think it's awesome. You might seem like that's weird, considering my ratings for the other ones, but that's just how it is. Again, this might also be a little bit because I have this one, so I am more fine with it. Also, the fact that you don't tend to use pistol main hand that much for a lot of stuff, so you don't really have to deal with the annoying sound effects sometimes, which they're not that bad in small amounts, but the purple glow really saves this weapon. Also, the outline on this weapon isn't bad. The glow on it. It's pretty alright, actually. It's pretty cool. Hope, on the other hand, goes right below it, in my opinion. And is it seriously below it just because of the purple glow? Yes, it's seriously below it just because of the purple glow. I love the purple glow. Hope, on the other hand, you basically make these legendaries for the opposite reasons. Hope's effects aren't the best, but the model is really cool. The model, the arm animation, like the bullet animation, that kind of stuff, super cool. Quip, it's all about the character animation and like the confetti effects on some of the skills, if you like that kind of stuff. In my opinion, at least. I do prefer Quip, but Hope is a very close second, and it is one of the legendaries that I would actually consider crafting Hope as well as Quip. A lot of these other ones I wouldn't necessarily consider making both, but this is one where I would at least consider making both. But I do really dig the purple aura, as I've said a million times. Let's move on to a series of weapons that doesn't need to go as hard as it does, but it does, and it doesn't care. That is the Warhorns. Now, you might be saying, what? The Warhorns aren't that great. But you do have to remember what we're comparing this to. We're comparing this to other Warhorns. And even compared to some other legendaries, these actually kind of go pretty hard, at least in my opinion. I really like the Howler. I know there's not a lot of people who really like the Howler, but I dig it. I think it's a nice little clean model. It's not too big, which is my favorite part of an offhand, when it's not freaking massive. So it doesn't like overshadow your main hand. It's got cool effects. The wolf head it summons is cool. The fog aura around you is cool. Much like Quip, it's got an aura on your character, which is good. Its footsteps are actually pretty cool as well. If you don't have a legendary in the main hand, I think it's a solid, like, A tier weapon. Probably better than the spear, in my opinion. Now, the other one, the Verdache, is a cool weapon as well. It's got this cool thing where when it's stowed, it's like in this ghostly appearance, and when you pull it out, it transforms into this big horn, and it's got these cool effects where ghosts come rushing out. The thing that holds this down, just for me in general, is just, like I said, I don't like it when my offhands are steal the spotlight from my main hands, and this is 100% an offhand that steals the spotlight from the main hand. So that's why it's at the bottom of A, but I think it's still very good effects. The transformation is kind of cool. The projectile effects and all that stuff are pretty cool on it. So overall, I definitely think it is a pretty cool weapon. It's just I personally prefer the Howler for myself. Next up, we're going to be talking about the legendary weapon that is probably the best one that I don't own, at least in my opinion. That is Gw2. Gw2 is one of the coolest legendaries in the game. It's a solid S tier. For a couple reasons. One, obviously, it's like the most thematic legendary, right? Because longbows are really only used by rangers for the most part. And it is the most ranger bow to ever ranger. Also, it has a unique theme kind of among all the legendaries. No other legendary is kind of like plant or nature based, really. So it's unique in that aspect. It's also got pretty cool footfalls, spawning like the flowery footfalls. It's just a very clean skin. It's got nice effects. It's a big bow, but it's not a thick bow, but it's still big enough to give you good animations. I think it's kind of underrated. I personally think it's a very solid one. And then from a great bow to a really bad bow. This is Faris. This thing looks like a black lion skin. If you told me this was a remodel of the Chaos Bow, I would not be surprised. It's kind of cool, but just doesn't have a lot going on. It's literally just a standard longbow that they slap some extra animations on, compared to it doesn't really feel legendary, at least in my opinion. Definitely, your results may vary. You may love it. That's totally fine. I just personally think, especially compared to Gw2, which I think is a pretty standout legendary from the bunch, Faris is Zanian. Let's move to Scepters next. First up is Meteorologicus. I'm going to put Meteorologicus in Where is it going to go? Where will he put it? Bottom of S for now. I actually really like this legendary, and if I had a reason to use Scepter, I would have made this a long time ago. I think this thing is clean as heck. Um, it's what I want a legendary to be. It's a little busy, but I feel like it's okay. I don't necessarily have an exact science to when I think it's okay that a weapon is busy and versus a weapon's not busy. Wish I could tell you, but for some reason I really dig this thing. I dig the whole Astro Globe theme, the coloration on it with the golds and the blues and the purples and the dark clouds at night is just super cool, super clean, and it feels legendary. I don't know, something about this weapon feels like legendary. This feels special whenever you look at someone with it. I don't really have a reason to use it, but I probably will be crafting it relatively soon as I get towards the end of my set. But I think it's, I think it's kind of underrated actually, because especially after they did the tweaks to it to add a lot more to it, it's a lot better than people give it credit for. I think it and Astrolaria are pretty close, but I do think it's a little bit better, kind of just due to other scepters being kind of lame. Now let's talk about Gw2. I'm going to give this thing a top of B tier. Now, hear me out before you say anything. Actually, you can say whatever you want. That's completely fine. I understand. Some people like different things. This thing is a very cool weapon. The weapon well, let me rephrase that. This thing has a very cool animation. The little dude you bring with you is super cool. The weapon itself looks like it's a green you picked up in a basic zone that someone slapped a couple extra effects on. And the fact that this weapon is so green. There's certain like colors and colorations that feel like you can use it with anything. Like it feels like you can use Meteorologicus with anything. If your character is jet black, jet pink, freaking realistic colored, it feels like Meteorologicus stands out enough and is different enough that it can be its own thing within your color thing. Whereas this feels like you need to be in this like green, like Aztec-y theme to use this scepter. Like if you're not in a green theme or like a dark black green theme, thing is just gonna look weird. The Pokemon's cool, but the model really drags this one down for me personally, and the colors really drag it down for me personally. Let's go on to the staffs. We have Nevermore. This is AS as well. Now, I think this might go right here above Incinerator. This is one of my favorite weapons. Obviously, it's up in S, but this has got a couple things going for it. It looks good when it's stowed because it's wide. This is something that a lot of scepters don't do. Not scepters, staffs don't do, in my opinion. They don't take up enough space on your back. They look kind of wrong. But because of the angle the branch is at and how it curls and how the bird hangs out right behind your shoulder, it looks good even when it's stowed, in my opinion, even though it doesn't have as many effects when it's stowed. And when you pull it out, it's got the big spectral raven in it. You have the weird, like the black feather arm effects, and the footsteps are cool. Like this thing just oozes style and is awesome. I love this thing. Let's go on to the Bifrost. The Bifrost is kind of it's an alright weapon. It's okay. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but in my opinion, it really does show the difference, at least for me, compared to Nevermore, with it the fact that it is literally just a straight line staff. Nevermore for me feels so much cooler because it takes up more space on your back, because it's a little bit wider, because it's on that better angle. This thing just feels like it's a stick. It's got cool effects, don't get me wrong, but it's not that great. I'm gonna put it in B. I think, where's it gonna go? Probably below Exordium. Exordium's actually probably the top of B, despite the fact I really don't like these two are kind of here just purely because the colors don't really suit me and they feel too limiting, and also this is a little bit busy. Also, this is dragged down by the fact that I personally think this is the best. But let's go on next to Hammers. Now, Hammers is hard, because the Hammers, to be completely honest with you, they aren't the best. They have some cool things going on with them. They have some cool effects, but they're not necessarily the best executed. So I'm going to put the Juggernaut right here below Quetzalcoatl, because I think it has kind of a similar problem in that it wants you to be in certain themes. You definitely want to be on a heavy armored character, or at the very least on a character that looks well armored, in my opinion. The chrome, like, goo effects are actually really cool. I really like that. The weapon itself, though, is just a little bit too plain when you don't have it out. It's just a little bit too plain. I wish it had a little bit more, like, coloration in it, maybe a little bit more gold. Um, maybe the hammerhead was a little bit more ornate or something. But whenever you pull it out, the effect makes it worth it, in my opinion. I think I would probably craft the Orion hammer personally if you were looking for a legendary hammer. But I don't think this is necessarily a bad one. It's just, it looks a little weird whenever you put like the chrome effect on like light armor and stuff like that, or even leather armor. So you definitely want to make sure your character looks armored if you want to use this thing. Now, Sharur. This is probably one of the least used legendaries, I would assume. This is definitely one of the legendaries I have seen the least. It actually has some cool effects. The nighttime version especially corrupts, so like coral and stuff grows on it. And like tendrils come out of it. It's pretty cool, the nighttime version of it, but sadly the daytime version of this thing is just a little bit, it's just a little not there. The theming is cool, the weapon is cool, but it's just the model's a little basic without the nighttime effect on it. Without the nighttime drawn effect on it with the growing coral and that kind of stuff. It's just not, doesn't do enough. So I'm gonna put it down here with I'm actually gonna put it down in C. I actually think it is a step below all these, because it is really cool at night, but it's only interesting half the time. The footfalls are kind of cool. Again, 3D footfalls give it a little bit of a bump, but it's just, it does get some uniqueness bump. You know what? Maybe it goes above the spear gun. I can live with it being above the spear gun, because the hammer itself, looking at it more, it's not the most undetailed thing. It's just, it doesn't quite get there, in my opinion. We have 3 weapons left. So let's go to shields. Foe fire, the Flameseeker Prophecies is a solid A tier weapon. It's good colors, gold, blue, good effects. The page turn, the draw effects, the blue effects do really well. The footfalls are actually pretty cool, even if you're probably rarely going to see them. Projectile effects pretty cool. Just generally a pretty cool shield in general. I much enjoy it. The only thing that bothers me about this shield at all is just the back of the shield itself not being super interesting. It's also about the perfect size for a shield, in my opinion. Personally, this is my second favorite shield in the entire game. I think the only shield that's better is Ghastly Grinning, personally. But take with that what you will. The Ghastly Grinning shield would be an S tier legendary if it was a legendary. Let's go on to the next shield, the Gen 2 shield, which is Shushidu. So you should probably have already known when I said that one was my second favorite. This thing is not. This thing does not do it. This thing is down here in C. So this is a cool idea. I love the idea of the Quaggan in the bowl doing stuff. That's a cool idea. But this thing just looks so silly. It's so big. It's so thick. And it's not even gold. In game, it's got this weird, like, gray, almost ice-covered appearance that just makes it look... It just doesn't look that good. I wish it was better, but it just... I don't know. This thing just doesn't do it for me. I definitely get why people would want it. It's literally a Quaggan in a bowl. That's cute. And that's kind of funny, but... personally, it don't do it for me. It's just not well colored. It's way too thick and bulky. So close, so close. All right, now let's go to Foci. We have the Minstrel first. This is a solid top of B weapon, in my opinion. It is pretty cool. The purple like effects with it, the drawn effects are pretty cool. It makes the little music note. This is probably the one legendary I do have though, where I'm not exactly sure if I would make it again given the chance. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's not bad. It's just not perfect. it's definitely pretty good for like mesmers and stuff like that, and it does look pretty good with the other legendaries. Like I do have it with Incinerator on a couple of sets, and it looks pretty cool there. But it's definitely not the best. The fact that it has a trail though is actually cool because it has a trail coming off the weapon. This actually means that if you have another legendary in your main hand for footfalls, you still do actually get some effects out of it. So I like it. I think it's all right. Top of B, almost A, but not quite enough animations there in my opinion to put it in A. But a solid weapon nonetheless. We're at 30 minutes. Okay, I'll try to wrap this up here. Binding of Iphos. This might be a controversial opinion. I'm putting this at the top of A, below Australaria. Now, why is this not an easy SS automatically? Well, that's because I don't want to have to make it. But there are some other reasons. I'm just sometimes in game just not super impressed when I see this thing. Like, it looks really cool by itself, but when I see it with other legendaries that I have, stuff like the Shining Blade, I'm just not super impressed with how it looks together. So this one is purely getting knocked down because it doesn't look great with other legendaries, which is, I know, a stupid reason. At least in my opinion, it doesn't look as good with other legendaries. Like, definitely if you have the Shining Blade in this, it's a little too much black for me. And that's a lot saying, considering most of my characters are all black. It's a little too dark, in my opinion, at least. I would much rather have Bolt with this thing, and that's saying a lot considering how much less I like Bolt than the Shining Blade. Would I go back and make this over the Minstrel if I had the chance? Probably. But if I already had the Minstrel, would I make this? No, probably not. Probably not for a while, at least. It's definitely a very cool effect. It looks awesome on Asurans. It's just, it feels a little limiting. Like, your character has to be jet black for it to look good, whereas, like, even stuff like Twilight that's jet black looks good on characters that are, like, you know, normally colored. Same thing with, like, Gw2. Whereas this feels like if you have a dark or an evil themed character, this is an insane weapon, but I'm not sure I'd just slap it on any character. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know. Again, my opinion might be swayed here just because I have the Minstrel and I've had it for such a long time that this doesn't necessarily, like, spark my interest as much, and that could totally also be the same case with Hope and Quip. But I think Hope and Quip are, like, I accept at least that these are a lot closer, at least in my opinion. These ones, on the other hand, not so much. I do think it's better, but not by a long margin. And definitely if you're like a Mesmer or something, Quip, or excuse me, not Quip, Minstrel can look a little bit better if you have a lot more golds and stuff in your armor. The Minstrel can definitely look better. All right, 2 weapons left, the rifles. All right, let's start off with the HMS Divinity. Where is this thing going? This thing is going right next to Shushadu, because in my opinion, it has the same problem. This thing is literally a square. At least for me, I don't like weapons that feel like squares. This thing feels like a square. It's too big. It's got the same problem Shushadu does. The model itself is cool, but the effect isn't super cool, in my opinion. The aura is kind of lame. This is one of those weapons that you buy basically purely for the weapon. It does look cool when it fires, but this is basically a weapon you buy purely for the weapon model. The effects aren't really there. For me, like, if you basically gave me this weapon without the legendary effects, like just the weapon model, and told me it was a Black Lion skin, I'd believe you. 100%. It almost feels like the effects on this weapon don't even match it, but I don't know how they could make effects that wouldn't necessarily match it. But again, it's not bad. It's an okay weapon. It's just personally doesn't do it for me. On the other hand, the Predator does do it for me. Main reasons why. A, it's literally a sniper rifle. Nothing is cooler than a sniper rifle. I don't care what people say. Sniper rifles are the coolest guns by a far margin, especially if you're talking about a rifle skin. It sounds great. It's sleek. That's good. It's not chunky. It's a sleek rifle, but it's still got a lot of character to the model. It's got good effects. I could be biased for this one again because I own it. I'm totally willing to say I'm biased because I own this thing, that I think it's better, that I think it's higher up. But even if I did not own this thing, I would still not say the HMS Divinity is better than it. Okay, not even close. I'd rather use like a super adventure rifle or something silly. All right, the Predator is, in my opinion, like the bottom of S. I think you could make an argument that maybe Australaria should be up here too, But man, whenever I just can't get it out of my head when somebody said, man, the axe is cheese colored in one of my raids. Whenever she made it, I was like, oh god, I see it now. And I can't stop thinking that this thing is just like a block of cheese with celestial effects or something. It's a silly thing I can't get over. Is there anything else I want to move around? I think maybe the Flame Seekers could come up here. Anything down here that needs moved around? I think this is pretty close. Yeah, this is pretty close to my tier list, in my opinion. I would love to hear your opinions below. You know, my opinions about a lot of this stuff changes over time, especially the stuff that isn't in S. Like the exact placement of a lot of this stuff in A and B sometimes will go up and down. Like some weeks I'm really feeling the howl and I'm like, yeah. And other weeks I'm like, could really care less. But in general, this S tier for sure is what stays almost all the time for me. These are by far my favorite legendaries. I would love to hear what your favorite are in the comments, though. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day.